This video will show you how to install a bumper on a 2000 NSX. The video will be relevant to a 1991 through 2001 Generation 1 NSX. This is any NSX with the flip-up headlights. In addition to the bumper, I'll also show you how to put on the flip-up headlight covers. Mine happen to be off, so I'll show you how to put those on as well. The backstory on this video is that I had to repair my bumper. I have a few videos on that, but that's why the bumper you're looking at here, that's a freshly repainted bumper. The upper half is brand new, the lower half was completely refinished. I don't have the emblem on the front of the car yet, but that's the short backstory of this video. Let's start off with these headlight covers. That'll only take a few moments and then the car will be ready for the bumper. First thing we want to do is raise the hood and raise the headlights. There's a button on the dashboard for raising the headlights, but if you have an NSX, I'm pretty sure you know that. So there's really nothing to these headlight covers. There's just 4 screws on each side. You've got 2 on the outer side of the car, 2 on the inner side of the car here and here. And on the outer side, on the left and the right, we have these little plastic clips that just kind of cover the bolts. So very simple process, and we'll do that now. Then these little plastic clips just snap in place. There's a little flat spot. I'm putting it toward the back. I don't think it matters. It's just for a screwdriver so you can get in there. And there we have it. Now we do the other side. Okay, with the headlight covers on, we are ready for the bumper. I think a few things we want to do to help ease this installation is tape a few things in place so when we put the bumper on, they stay out of the way, and then we're also able to retrieve them through the bumper. So let me show you a few items I'm referring to. First thing I want to get is this is the windshield wiper fluid hose, so I want to kind of tape that on top to make sure that doesn't get caught between the bumper when we're trying to push that on. And the other things I'm worried about are we want to make sure that the horn harnesses are where they're supposed to be. So we got a horn harness here, that's where it's supposed to be. We got a horn harness over here where it's supposed to be. And then that longer harness is for the temperature sensor. So we'll leave that there, that looks good. My floodlights, you can see those wires hanging down here and over here. So those are fine as well. I do want to make sure that the headlight and blinker light harnesses are kind of taped up and in a place where we'll be able to get to them once the bumper's on. For those of you that have the floodlights, I'm going to show you where I put the wiring. So this here is the floodlights. I wanted to get it in between this back plate, so I put it through here. Comes out the bottom. That'll be easy to get to. Next, we want to stage the bumper for installation, and that will be inclusive of the windshield wiper reservoir and the bumper bar. One key point to remember is that the bumper hanger, so the little tabs that hold the bumper on the car when the bolts are undone, are on this bumper bar here. They're located right there, and the other one is on the other side, right over here. Close-up view of those tabs. So this is the left-hand side, and this is the metal tab that you can hook the bumper onto the car with, and it will stay on the car without having all the bolts hooked up. And the other one is identical on the far side there. And those hooks hook right here, and the other one is on the other side in the same location there. If you have removed the front bumper bar, when reinstalling, do not forget this plastic bracket. This bracket particularly gets bolted onto the back here. So this bolt here is to bolt on. So that is the driver's side of the car. The other bracket, which looks like this, is what goes for the, or goes with the tow hook. And this goes like this under here. But this can be put on if this is already on, but this one cannot. Here you see that I zip tied on a latex glove to keep the windshield wiper fluid reservoir from leaking. Now that we're gonna need the ability to kind of quickly remove that and put the, or attach the hose from the car, I'm gonna replace that. I'm gonna take just a piece of clay and plug that hole for the time being. All I did is rip a piece of clay bar for cleaning the car, and I'm just using it to just keep that plugged up just for the few minutes it's gonna take to get this all organized. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna hang the bumper bar. So I showed you those clips. Those clips should hold that bumper bar in place, and then we'll be able to put the whatever rubber bumper over the top of that. Okay, we got our tabs here and here, and they're gonna go here and here. And here we have the bumper bar on, and we can see that this is already installed. It gets installed again from the back, so you really need to get this on beforehand. We are almost ready to put the bumper on, but before we do that, we don't want to forget to attach the windshield wiper fluid hose. So I need to quickly swap this hose, pull off this clay, and stick the hose on there. It's simply a press fit. There's no clip or anything of that nature. One more item I almost forgot to mention is directly above where that hose goes in, there is a electrical connector that we do need to plug in, otherwise we're not going to have windshield wiper fluid. So here's the connector, relatively easy to see, and the wires themselves come from this side of the car over here. So I had to kind of fish out the wires, which I found under here. So now we got to get this fished up there so we can connect the windshield wiper motor. Once you have this installed, double check that these wires haven't been caught in between the bumper and this bumper bar. We want to make sure these wires can get to this location where the turn signal lights are going to go in. So we have the 3 bolts that need to be installed, and I'm going to install those now. That's this bolt here, and this final bolt over here. Okay, so we'll install those 6 bolts. That's a 12mm socket. Okay, now we've got our bumper bar firmly attached to the car. Now we are ready to hang the front bumper. One more prep item before we go to put the bumper on. The chin spoiler or the lip spoiler, the bolts on the very end of the bumper on both sides do need to come out because these also connect in with this area here, which is part of the car. So we need to remove those bolts before we install the bumper. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of maneuvering, but it's time to put the bumper on. The bolts that will hold it in place once we get it in place will be these top places here and here. There's 2 bolts on each side. These are the bolts. Mine are all different sizes by a little bit, but I presume they're all supposed to be one size. But this should work in any case. So we want to have these bolts available so we can keep the bumper in place once we get it to the location it should be. These are the holes that we'll be screwing into on either side. And very simply, the top of the bumper has them here. So relatively straightforward, although it's going to take a little bit of maneuvering to get the bumper in place. The key elements that are going to take some effort are the following. So this piece of metal is going to have to be bent back, and it's going to slip in this area here. So the metal's going to get stuck here. When you go to put it on, you got to kind of bend it back and get it behind here. In addition to that, this post and this post go to these holes here. Not this one here, but this guy here and this one over here. So it's going to take a little bit of maneuvering, but it shouldn't be too terribly bad. The bumper's a bit heavy. I'm doing it by myself. I'm sure you can as well, but 2 people would be helpful. Okay, here we go. We'll give it a shot. Okay, I got the bolts loosely on there, so now it's a matter of carefully checking all the interference points behind the bumper and snugging this up. Now that we have the bumper at least hanging on the car, before we try snugging any bolts down, we want to pull the wires for the blinker and parking lights and get them into this cavity to make sure they don't get pinched. Now that we've taken care of all of our pinch point concerns and also got our wires where we need to have them, we should be able to get this bumper to snug up nicely, and then we'll move to the next step of securing it. One of the key points is the bolts on the front of the bumper that are facing this way. They have to make it into the frame of the car that is behind the quarter panels. So if you're having difficulty aligning the bolts on the top, just make sure you've got them in on both sides and things should start to fall into place. Okay, now we've got both bolts lightly put in on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the car. You do not want to snug those up, not even remotely snug at this point, because what we're going to want to do is get the nuts from the posts on the side of the bumper that are going into the quarter panels. We want to get those locked in and let the bumper kind of self-align itself. Okay, so our next area to secure the bumper is going to be behind the wheel well. So the first thing we're going to want to do, we're on the left-hand side of the car, we're going to want to turn the wheel all the way to the right so we have as much room as possible to work inside that well. Okay, so now we need to install a bolt and 2 nuts. The bolt is for right here. It goes through this and into this here, this piece of aluminum. That is a bolt and it is 10 millimeter. Then there are 2 nuts which are here coming through the, not the firewall, but through the quarter panel. And then there's another one further up and further back, which is right there. So we get nuts on those, and we're gonna wanna get the nut on there, but then we're gonna wanna make sure everything is lined up before we snug it up. So I was a lot more careful and paid a lot more attention to the gaps and the seams and everything lining up when installing the bumper this time. And I will say this, there is some movement. So what I have found the best process is get the bumper on, lightly thread the 2 bolts that come through here with the nuts from the back, then focus on this nut first. Do not do this, the bolt that's coming in from this side. Focus on this nut. You can kind of adjust it and keep this nice and flush. Once you have this nice and flush, then move to this bolt, get that tightened up nice, and then the last piece is up here, which is a little bit more challenging. It doesn't look like you can quite get this perfect. I mean, maybe I couldn't anyway, but by basically grabbing the car like this and pushing down on this and pulling on this, I was able to get this almost perfectly flat. And I did the same thing on the other side. And I'm doing all of that prior to putting the bolts up top on the hood here. Or not the hood, but where the hood kind of comes down. Now with all the bolts snugged up from the sides, so the two nuts on the top and the bolts on the sides going outward, now I want to make sure the hood is aligned, and then we can snug up these bolts, which I don't even have threaded in, which I probably should have done, but nonetheless. So this is where I find a challenge. Basically, the ridge of the hood is supposed to go into this little L channel here in the rubber, and I've found, at least on my car, that it's struggling to get in there. It's almost like I need just a little bit more play. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pull on the bumper and then start snugging up those bolts, because I like this hood to fit nicely in there. So this is what I'm referring to. I'm just gonna kind of pull on this once I get the bolts threaded in here and try to get this out just a millimeter or so the hood fits nicely in this channel. Now we need to put the wheel well back together, and the clips I took out are, first we need to get the shoulder bolt that goes into the lower lip, into the lower bumper, and it also goes into the internal wheel well skirt as well. In addition to that, we have two clips, two screws with nut plates that go here and up, and over here, and then we have a push pin that goes here. So on these items here, there's this plastic nut plate. These items are interesting. I'm not 100% positive how you're supposed to do them, but what it appears is that you pull back the inner well skirt, you bolt them down relatively tight, and you put them in an orientation such that this bent piece here is down. I shouldn't say down, but it is set up such that when you tighten it, it pulls itself this way, and then this lip here kind of gets caught behind the quarter panel. So that's the best I can do in relation to figuring out how these work. We'll see how that goes. I've got them tightened on this skirt here and here, and now I'm gonna put these new push pins I bought in here, and actually I think I got one missing under here as well. So the plastic push pins I was able to order, and these are the part numbers to the best of my knowledge. And here's the driver's side bracket, the one that had to get behind the crash bar, and of course that stays there, or is there, when you put the bumper on. And then this just goes in with another shoulder bolt similar or the same as the bolts for the lower lip. On the passenger side of the car, we simply install this bracket, no problem. Bolt here, which is attached to the tow hook, and then bolt here. Here's the angle you'll be looking at for that screwdriver. It's pretty deep in there. You really do need kind of a long screwdriver. And be careful because it's a soft plastic screw, as I recall. We don't want to forget to plug in our temperature sensor here. So the brown clip is attached to the wire, and that just plugs into the sensor.